Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, calm voice over a secure line, a voice that can bring a 200-ton metal bird to a screeching halt on the tarmac. For 17-year-old Maya Baldwin, that voice belonged to her father. For gate agent Susan Peterson, who had just thrown a young girl's future in the trash alongside discarded coffee cups and chewing gum wrappers, that voice was the sound of her world ending. She just didn't know it yet. This isn't just a story about a flight. It's about the moment a routine act of cruelty collided with absolute authority, right at Gate B-24. Before we begin, comment where you are watching from today, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now let's get into it. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hummed with a unique kind of energy. A symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and 1,000 overlapping conversations in a dozen languages. It was the sound of anticipation, of hellos and goodbyes, of journeys beginning and ending. For 17-year-old Maya Baldwin, it was the sound of her future taking flight. Clutching her boarding pass for Apex Air Flight 712 to Boston, she felt a thrill that had nothing to do with the roar of the jets outside the panoramic windows. This wasn't just any trip. This was her acceptance into the prestigious summer aerospace engineering program at MIT, a 7-week deep dive into aeronautics and propulsion systems that she had dreamed of since she was old enough to build model rockets with her dad. Her first-class ticket, a celebratory gift from her parents, felt like a golden key to a new world. She found a seat with a clear view of the tarmac, her backpack resting carefully on her lap. Inside was her laptop, a notebook filled with preliminary equations, and a well-worn copy of Ignition, an informal history of liquid rocket propellants. She was ready. Her phone buzzed, and her dad's picture lit up the screen. She answered with a wide grin. "Hey, Dad. Hey, superstar, you at the gate?" James Baldwin's voice was a familiar comfort, calm, steady, and with an undercurrent of warmth that always made her feel safe. "Gate B-24. I can see our plane. It's a Boeing 737-800. Looks like it has the newer Scimitar winglets," she said, peering out the window like a seasoned analyst. James chuckled on the other end. "Only you would notice that. Everything going smoothly? No issues with check-in?" "Smooth as can be. They didn't even weigh my carry-on, which is good because my fluid dynamics textbook weighs about 10 pounds. That's my girl. Listen, your mom and I are so proud of you, Maya. This is the start of something big. Work hard, ask questions, and soak it all in. And remember what I told you? Always know where the nearest exit is, and if there's ever a problem you can't solve, call you," she recited, the words a familiar mantra from a lifetime of travel with a father whose career was aviation. "Exactly. Any problem, big or small, you call me. I've got to run. There's a weather system moving over the Atlantic that we're tracking. Have a great flight. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Talk to you when I land." She hung up, a sense of profound contentment washing over her. Her father, James Baldwin, was her hero. To most of the world, he was the regional director of air traffic operations for the Federal Aviation Administration's Northeast Corridor, a title that sounded impossibly complex and important. To her, he was the man who taught her the 4 forces of flight, who stayed up late helping her with physics homework, and whose unwavering belief in her was the wind beneath her own wings. Across the bustling gate area, Susan Peterson watched the passengers trickle in. From her perch behind the counter, she saw the world as a procession of entitled, demanding people. 20 years with Apex Air, and what did she have to show for it? A bad back, perpetually sore feet, and a name badge that still read Gate Agent, while younger, less experienced people were promoted to supervisor roles. Her eyes scanned the waiting area, her gaze snagging on Maya. She saw a young black girl, probably not even out of her teens, sitting alone with a first-class ticket folder. Susan felt a familiar, sour twist in her gut. She'd seen it 100 times. A rich kid, probably flying on her daddy's money, taking up a seat that should belong to a loyal business traveler who actually earned it. The girl was dressed simply in jeans and a hoodie, which only confirmed Susan's suspicion. She didn't belong. Susan's life was a tapestry of perceived slights and injustices. She believed the world was rigged, that people like that girl got everything handed to them while people like her, who worked hard every single day, were left behind. Today, her bitterness was particularly sharp. Her morning had started with a snide email from corporate about boarding times, and her request for a holiday weekend off had been denied. She looked at Maya again, who was now engrossed in a book. The girl's serene confidence was like a personal insult. Susan squared her shoulders, a grim resolution settling over her. She was a guardian of this gate. She decided who was worthy of passage, and she had already decided that this girl was not. The first boarding call was still 30 minutes away, but Susan was already planning the confrontation. Today, someone else was going to feel what it was like to be put in their place. The automated announcement chimed, and a disembodied voice invited all active-duty military personnel and families with small children to pre-board. A few people shuffled forward, and the gate area stirred to life. Susan Peterson stood up, adjusting her uniform jacket and plastering on a smile that was as thin and brittle as ice on a puddle. Her colleague, a younger man named Ben, handled the document scanner while she prepared to make the first-class boarding call. "We would now like to invite our first-class passengers to begin boarding," Susan announced into the microphone, her voice sharp and devoid of any real warmth. Maya carefully packed her book into her backpack, zipped it up, and joined the short line forming at the podium. She was third in line, behind a man in a crisp business suit and a woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair. When it was her turn, she stepped forward and handed her boarding pass and passport to Susan, offering a polite smile. "Good morning." Susan didn't return the smile. She took the documents, her eyes flicking from the passport photo to Maya's face, then down to the first-class designation on the boarding pass. She held them for a moment longer than necessary, her lips pursed into a thin line. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, her voice quiet. Susan tapped the passport on the counter. "Where did you get this ticket?" she asked, her tone accusatory. Maya was taken aback. "My parents bought it for me. It's a graduation present." "Your parents?" Susan's eyebrow arched with theatrical disbelief. She leaned forward, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial, condescending whisper. "Look, honey, sometimes people get tickets they aren't supposed to have. Maybe you're traveling with someone who is actually in first class. His seat is probably in the back." The implication was as clear as it was ugly. Maya felt a hot flush of anger and embarrassment creep up her neck. The man behind her in line shifted his weight impatiently. "Excuse me?" Maya said, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor of indignation. "My name is Maya Baldwin. The ticket is in my name. The seat 1A is mine." Susan's fake smile returned, this time laced with venom. "I'm sure that's what it says, but we've been having a lot of issues with fraudulent documents lately. This passport," she said, flicking it with her fingernail, "it just doesn't look quite right." Ben, the other agent, glanced over, a worried expression on his face. He knew Susan's moods, and he could see this was escalating. "Susan, it looks fine to me," he mumbled, trying to intervene. Susan shot him a look that could curdle milk. "I'll be the judge of that, Ben. I'm the senior agent here." She turned her attention back to Maya, her eyes narrowed. "I'm going to need to see another form of ID. A driver's license. A school ID with a hologram." Maya's mind raced. She was only 17. She had a learner's permit, not a full license, and it was tucked away in her wallet inside her checked bag. Her school ID was in the same place. "My passport is a federally issued valid form of identification," Maya stated, her voice firmer now. The words her father had taught her about her rights as a passenger echoed in her mind. "It's all I'm required to show." "That's where you're wrong," Susan snapped, her voice rising in volume. Other passengers were starting to stare. "I am the final authority at this gate, and if I say your ID is questionable, it's questionable. You're holding up the line. I think you should step aside." "I'm not stepping aside," Maya said, her chin held high. "My documents are valid. You can scan them. You can run my name. There is no reason for you to deny me boarding." Susan's face was turning a blotchy red. She had expected the girl to crumble, to get scared and back down. This quiet defiance infuriated her. It felt like another challenge to her authority, another sign of the disrespect she endured daily. In her warped view, Maya wasn't just a passenger. She was the embodiment of everything Susan resented. "You have a real attitude, you know that?" Susan hissed. "People like you come in here thinking the rules don't apply to you, thinking you can just waltz into first class." The woman with the silver hair who had been in front of Maya turned around. "For heaven's sake," she said to Susan, "the girl has a valid passport. Scan it and let her on the plane. You're causing a scene." This outside interference was the final spark on Susan's short fuse. All her frustration, her bitterness, and her unfounded prejudice coalesced into a single reckless act. She looked at Maya, then at the passport in her hand, and then at the small, gray trash bin next to the podium. The world seemed to slow down for Maya. She saw the decision form in Susan's eyes, a flash of malicious triumph that made her blood run cold. Before she could react, before anyone could intervene, Susan's hand moved with vicious speed. "This is what I think of your valid ID," Susan spat out, her voice dripping with contempt. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed Maya's dark blue passport into the trash bin. The small booklet didn't just land on top. The bin was lined with a clear plastic bag, half full from the morning's refuse. It landed with a soft, sickening thud atop a pile of used napkins, a banana peel, and the wet, gritty dregs of discarded coffee grounds from the nearby staff room. A brown smudge immediately stained the golden eagle on the cover. A collective gasp went through the line. Ben, the other agent, stared in open-mouthed horror. The businesswoman behind Maya exclaimed, "Oh my God, did you just see that? She threw her passport in the garbage." For a moment, Maya couldn't breathe. It felt like Susan had thrown a piece of her future into that bin. The trip, the program, the culmination of years of hard work, all of it was symbolized by that passport, now lying in a pile of trash. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging, born of pure shock and humiliation. You can't do that," she stammered, her voice trembling. "That's a federal document. You have to get it out." Susan crossed her arms, a smug, unrepentant smirk on her face. "I don't have to do anything. You're not a passenger on this flight anymore. You have no valid identification. Now, I suggest you leave the gate area before I call security." The cruelty was so profound, so absolute, that it left Maya reeling. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a procedural issue. This was a deliberate act of hate. The other passengers were now in an uproar, some berating Susan, others pulling out their phones to record. "This is outrageous," the silver-haired woman said, her voice shaking with anger. "I'm a platinum medallion member with this airline, and I have never seen such disgusting behavior. What is your name?" Susan's smirk faltered slightly at the sight of the recording phones, but she doubled down. "My name is Susan Peterson, and I'm doing my job. This area is for ticketed passengers only. This person," she said, gesturing dismissively at Maya, "is not. She needs to leave." But Maya wasn't looking at Susan anymore. Her vision was blurred with tears, but her mind was suddenly chillingly clear. Amid the chaos and the shouting, her father's voice cut through the noise in her head. "If there's ever a problem you can't solve, call me." This was a problem she couldn't solve. She was a 17-year-old girl being publicly humiliated by an adult in a position of power. Her documents were in the trash. Security would likely side with the airline employee. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone. She ignored the commotion around her, the angry voices and Susan's imperious commands. She found her dad's number in her recent calls and pressed the button. As the phone began to ring, she walked a few feet away from the podium, turning her back on the scene, trying to find a pocket of quiet in the storm. Her father answered on the second ring, his voice all business. "Baldwin." "Dad," Maya whispered, and then a sob broke through, a raw, ragged sound of distress. "Dad, you have to help me." And just like that, the entire equation at Gate B-24 was about to change. James Baldwin was standing in the heart of the FAA's Northeast Corridor Command Center, a cavernous room where one wall was a mosaic of glowing screens displaying air traffic over a dozen states. It was a place of controlled, high-stakes pressure, where calm voices guided thousands of lives through the sky. He had just finished a briefing on the transatlantic weather patterns when his personal cell phone, the one reserved for family, vibrated. "Baldwin," he answered, his tone professional by habit. "Dad," came Maya's voice, small and broken. "Dad, you have to help me." Every ounce of professional detachment in James's body evaporated. The FAA director was gone, and a father took his place. He moved away from the main operations floor, seeking the relative quiet of a side office. "Maya, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? Did something happen?" he asked, his voice a low, urgent rumble. He heard her take a shuddering breath. "I'm at the gate. The agent. She wouldn't let me board. She said my passport was fake." James's knuckles whitened as he gripped his phone. He had heard stories of bias and mistreatment, but he had always armed Maya with the knowledge and confidence to navigate such situations. This felt different. He could hear the genuine trauma in her voice. "Okay, Maya, stay calm. What's the agent's name? What airline are you flying?" "Apex Air, Flight 712 to Boston," Maya managed to say between sobs. "Her name is Susan Peterson. Dad, she took my passport." A cold, hard knot formed in James's stomach. "What do you mean she took it, Maya? Is she holding it?" There was a pause, and then Maya's voice came out in a devastating whisper. "She threw it in the trash can, in front of everyone. She threw it in the trash, and now she's telling me to leave or she'll call security." The words hit James like a physical blow. The image of his daughter's passport, her identity, her key to the future she was so excited about, lying in a heap of garbage sent a surge of pure, cold fury through him. But he was a man defined by his composure under pressure. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford, not in his job, and not now. His mind instantly shifted from paternal rage to tactical precision. "Maya, listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice dropping into the calm, authoritative tone he used to avert mid-air crises. "Do not leave the gate. Do not engage with that woman any further. Just stand to the side. Are you listening?" "Yes," she whispered. "Good. What is your exact location?" "Gate B-24, Terminal 4. "Okay, I'm handling it. It's going to be okay, I promise you. Just stay on the phone with me, but you don't have to talk." He muted his end of the line. He walked back onto the main floor, his face a mask of stone. He didn't go to a phone. He went straight to the direct line console connected to every major control tower and ground control unit in the region. He bypassed the airline's corporate structure entirely. He was going to the source. He keyed the microphone for JFK Tower's ground control frequency. His voice, when he spoke, was devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of pure institutional power. "JFK Ground, this is FAA Command Center, Director Baldwin on the line." The response from the tower was immediate, the controller's voice snapping to attention. "Command Center, go ahead, Director. I need you to issue an immediate ground stop for Apex Air Flight 712, service to Boston, currently at Gate B-24. There was a fractional pause on the other end. A ground stop on a single specific flight initiated by the regional director himself was highly unusual. It wasn't a weather delay or a mechanical issue. This was a direct order from the top. "Confirming, Command," the controller said carefully. "Ground stop on Apex 712. May I have a reason for the log?" James looked at the screens showing the intricate dance of aircraft on the ground at JFK. He saw the icon for Apex 712, stationary but active. "The reason is a Code 7 violation," James said, his voice like ice. "Interference with a federal officer's family member and desecration of a U.S. federal document by airline ground staff. The aircraft is not to be moved or serviced." No pushback, no clearance. It is grounded, effective immediately, until I am on site. Understood, Command. Ground stop initiated. James switched frequencies to the Port Authority Police Department dispatcher at JFK. This is FAA Director Baldwin. I am en route to Terminal 4, Gate B24. I need a uniformed officer and a supervisor to meet me at the gate entrance. We have a situation with an airline employee. He then made one final call to the head of Apex Air's JFK operations, a man he knew personally. The call was brief and brutal. Daniel, this is James Baldwin. Your agent at Gate B24 on Flight 712 has just committed a federal offense involving my daughter. Your aircraft is now under an FAA ground stop. I suggest you meet me there in 5 minutes if you want any hope of your airline flying out of New York today. He unmuted his phone to Maya. I'm on my way, honey. Just stay put. In the cockpit of Apex Air 712, Captain Ava Rostova was going through her pre-flight checklist. The jet bridge was still attached, but boarding was complete. She was about to call for pushback clearance when her radio crackled. Apex 712, JFK ground. Go ahead, ground. Apex 712 is ready for pushback. Apex 712, be advised. You are under an FAA-mandated ground stop. I repeat, you are on a ground stop. Do not move the aircraft. Await further instructions. Captain Rostova stared at her first officer. A ground stop? For us specifically, not the whole airport? That's what he said, the first officer replied, bewildered. FAA mandated. What in the world did we do? Captain Rostova keyed her mic to the gate agent's line. This is Captain Rostova. What is going on out there? The tower just put a ground stop on my plane. Get me your station manager now. The carefully constructed world of Susan Peterson was about to be utterly and irrevocably dismantled. The scene at Gate B24 had devolved into a tense standoff. Passengers from Flight 712 were still on the plane, their departure inexplicably delayed. Passengers in the gate area were murmuring, many of them having witnessed the incident and now recording the aftermath. Susan Peterson, for her part, was trying to project an aura of control, though a seed of doubt had begun to sprout in her mind. Her station manager, Daniel Fletcher, hadn't answered his phone, and the plane's captain had just yelled at her over the intercom. She was in the middle of telling a particularly vocal passenger to mind his own business when she saw them. Walking with brisk, undeniable purpose down the concourse were 3 figures. In the middle was a tall black man in a sharp suit, his face set like granite. On one side of him was a Port Authority police supervisor, his hand resting near his sidearm. On the other was a senior airport official. They moved with an energy that parted the crowds before them. Susan watched them approach, an uneasy feeling fluttering in her chest. They weren't walking towards the plane. They were walking directly towards her podium. Maya, still standing to the side on the phone with her dad, saw him first. Relief washed over her so powerfully her knees felt weak. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent message. I'm here now. It's over. The trio came to a halt directly in front of Susan's counter. Daniel Fletcher, the station manager, came sprinting up behind them, breathless and pale. Director Baldwin, I just got your message. I'm so sorry I was in the operations center. What's going on? Susan's blood ran cold. Director Baldwin. She looked from the imposing man in the suit to the terrified face of her own manager, and the pieces began to click into place with horrifying clarity. James Baldwin ignored Fletcher for a moment, his eyes, cold and hard as diamonds, locked onto Susan. Are you Susan Peterson? He asked, his voice low and dangerously quiet. Susan could only nod, her throat suddenly dry. I am James Baldwin, he said, letting the name hang in the air. I am the FAA Regional Director of Air Traffic Operations. I am the man who just put a ground stop on your flight, and I'm also this young lady's father. He gestured towards Maya. The color drained completely from Susan's face. The smugness, the righteous indignation, the years of bitterness. It all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a stark, primal fear. She looked at Maya, truly looked at her for the first time, and saw not the person she had imagined, but the daughter of one of the most powerful men in American aviation. "My daughter tells me," James continued, his voice never rising but cutting through the silence of the now wrapped gate area, "that you questioned her identity, accused her of fraud, and then took her United States passport and threw it in this garbage can. Is that correct?" Susan opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stammered, looking wildly from James to her manager, as if seeking an escape. I thought. It looked. Did you or did you not throw a United States passport, a federal document, into that trash can?" James pressed, his gaze unwavering. Tears of terror began to stream down Susan's face. "Yes," she whispered, the confession barely audible. James Baldwin turned to Daniel Fletcher, the airline manager. "Mr. Fletcher, your airline has a serious problem. You have an employee who believes she has the authority to unilaterally seize and destroy federal property based on her own personal prejudice. You have an employee who has illegally detained and harassed a passenger. As a result, your airline is currently facing an FAA investigation that will scrutinize your hiring practices, your training protocols, and your corporate oversight. Your flight, Apex 712, will not be leaving this gate until this situation is resolved to my satisfaction." He then turned back to Susan. The moment of reckoning had arrived. "Now," James said, his voice dropping even lower, "you are going to retrieve my daughter's passport." Susan stared at James Baldwin, then at the insignificant gray trash bin beside her podium. The world, which just moments ago had been her stage, had shrunk to the space between these 2 points, the man representing an authority she couldn't comprehend, and the bin containing the evidence of her colossal miscalculation. His command, "You are going to retrieve my daughter's passport," did not register as a simple instruction. It landed in her mind as a sentence, a verdict delivered not with a gavel's crack, but with the chilling stillness of his voice. For a dizzying second, her mind refused to process it. She, Susan Peterson, a 20-year veteran of this airline, a senior agent, was being told to dig through the trash? The idea was so absurd, so far beyond the realm of possibility, that a hysterical laugh almost bubbled up from her chest. Her mind scrambled for a defense, a foothold on the slippery cliff face of her reality. This had to be a power play, a bluff. He couldn't possibly be serious. You want me to," she stammered, the words feeble and useless. She looked desperately at her station manager, Daniel Fletcher, her eyes pleading for him to intervene, to restore the natural order of things where she was the one in uniform and they were the ones who had to listen. "That is correct," James said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotional inflection. It was that very lack of emotion that terrified her. This wasn't anger she could argue with or outrage she could deflect. This was procedural. It was the voice of a system immense and implacable, and she was a foreign object it was now grinding into dust. "This wasn't an accident, Miss Peterson. It was a choice, an act of deliberate malice, and acts have consequences. You will now perform the act of undoing it. You put it in there. You will take it out. Right now. In front of everyone you chose to perform for." The phrase "perform for" struck a nerve deep inside her. Had she been performing? She had felt so powerful, so in control, finally putting one of the entitled ones in their place. Now, seeing the sea of cell phones pointed at her, she realized she was still the center of attention, but the role had been horrifically recast. She was no longer the righteous gatekeeper. She was the spectacle, the fool. Daniel Fletcher, his face slick with sweat, saw his career flashing before his eyes. He saw corporate inquiries, lawsuits, and a PR firestorm that would scorch the airline's reputation. He rushed forward, his hands held up in a placating gesture. "Director, please. On behalf of Apex Air, I am profoundly sorry. This is unacceptable. Let me handle this. I'll have one of the cleaning crew get it immediately. We'll have it professionally sanitized, whatever it takes. There's no need for Miss Peterson to..." James Baldwin finally turned his head, a slow, deliberate motion to look at the station manager. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Mr. Fletcher," he said, and the temperature at the gate seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This is no longer an airline customer service issue. This is now a federal matter. Your employee used her position of authority, granted by your airline and by proxy the airport authority, to illegally confiscate and attempt to destroy a United States passport. This is not about sanitation. This is about accountability. The woman who committed the act will be the one to reverse it. It is a lesson that needs to be witnessed. Do you understand me?" Fletcher's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He looked from James's granite expression to the Port Authority officer standing silently beside him, a living statue of enforcement. He simply nodded, defeated. "Yes, Director, I understand." The path was cleared. There were no more buffers, no more shields. It was just Susan, the floor, and the bin. Every eye in the terminal seemed to be locked on her as she took a slow, shuffling step from behind the safety of her podium. Her legs felt like they were filled with wet sand. The polished floor seemed to stretch for miles. The muffled announcements over the PA system sounded like they were coming from another planet. Her world was the sound of her own ragged breathing and the thumping of her heart against her ribs. She reached the bin. The institutional gray plastic seemed to mock her. She knelt, the sound of her knees hitting the linoleum floor unnaturally loud in the cavernous silence. It was an act of supplication, of total surrender. Her pride, the brittle, bitter shield she had carried for 2 decades, shattered into a million pieces. Then the smell hit her. It was the mundane, sour stench of office garbage, stale coffee, the faint sweetness of rotting fruit, wet paper. A wave of nausea washed over her, and she gagged, pressing a hand to her mouth. This was her punishment. Not just the humiliation, but this sensory degradation. With a tremor that started in her fingertips and radiated up her arm, she reached into the clear plastic liner. Her hand, the same one that had so arrogantly tossed the passport away, now had to enter the filth. Her fingers brushed against a cold, slimy banana peel, and she recoiled with a small cry. Tears of self-pity and horror streamed freely down her face, mingling with the sweat on her upper lip. She squeezed her eyes shut, not wanting to see what she was touching. She pushed aside a wad of stiff, damp napkins. Her fingers sank into the gritty, wet sludge of coffee grounds that had coated the bottom. It was a nightmare, a surreal, waking terror where she was the central figure in her own abasement. Where was it? For a moment, a wild, insane hope flared. Maybe it had vanished. Maybe this was all a dream. Then her questing fingers touched it, the distinct, hard-edged corner of the booklet. It was slick with grime. She grasped it, her revulsion warring with a desperate need to get this over with. She pulled her hand from the bin. There it was, the dark blue passport, the proud golden eagle on its cover now grotesquely smeared with a brown, gritty paste and a streak of something yellowish. She held it between her thumb and forefinger, dangling it away from her body as if it were a dead rat. She slowly, shakily got to her feet, her entire body trembling with shame. She couldn't look up. She couldn't bear to see their faces. The cold fury of the father, the quiet dignity of the daughter, the pity and disgust of the crowd. She just stared at the defiled document in her hand. "Look at me, Miss Peterson," James Baldwin commanded, his voice pulling her gaze upward against her will. His eyes were like chips of obsidian. "Now give it to my daughter, and you will apologize." Susan shuffled the few feet toward Maya. It was the longest journey of her life. She stood before the girl she had tried to break, the girl who now stood as a silent, powerful testament to her failure. Susan thrust the passport forward, still unable to meet Maya's eyes. I'm sorry," she mumbled, the words a meaningless puff of air. James stepped forward slightly. "No, that is not an apology. That is a dismissal. You will look her in the eye and you will state what you are sorry for." Susan's head snapped up, her eyes wild with panic. "I'm sorry, I just—" "Look at her," James repeated, his voice dangerously soft. With a monumental effort, Susan forced her gaze to meet Maya's. She saw no triumph in the young woman's eyes, no gloating. She saw a deep, profound hurt, mingled with a surprising and somehow more shaming flicker of pity. That look broke something deep inside Susan. "I am sorry," she said, her voice cracking, a raw, wretched sob tearing from her throat. "I am sorry I accused you. I'm sorry I took your passport. I am sorry I threw it away. It was wrong. I was wrong." Maya, who had watched the entire horrifying spectacle with a churning stomach, said nothing. She simply took the soiled passport from Susan's trembling hand. Her silence was a judgment more potent than any shout could have been. She accepted the apology not for Susan's sake, but for her own. A quiet closing of a painful chapter. James took a pristine white handkerchief from his breast pocket and handed it to Maya. "Wipe it off, honey," he said gently, his voice for her alone. Then the father receded, and the director returned. He turned to the Port Authority officer who had been observing everything with professional detachment. "Officer, I want a full report filed. I want you to cite Title 18, Section 1544 of the U.S. Code for misuse of a passport. I also want you to include interference with passenger screening procedures under 49 CFR Part 1540. Miss Peterson's actions constitute a security breach at this checkpoint. Her airport credentials, her SIDEA badge, everything are to be revoked effective immediately. I want her escorted from the airport, not just the gate, the entire airport. I will be following up personally with your supervisor to ensure the report is filed correctly." Each word was a nail in the coffin of Susan's career. Her SIDA badge was her life, her access to this world. Without it, she couldn't even work as a baggage handler. Finally, James turned his full, undivided attention to the ashen-faced Daniel Fletcher. "Your employee is a reflection of your corporate culture, Mr. Fletcher. Her actions on your clock are your actions. Her termination is the first, smallest step in convincing me that Apex Air understands the severity of this breach. That is not a request. That is a condition for your airline to continue its smooth operation out of this hub. If I check your records tomorrow and she is still listed as an employee, in any capacity, I will launch a full operational audit of your entire JFK station. I assure you, your airline, and your shareholders do not want that. Am I crystal clear?" "Crystal clear, Director," Fletcher whispered, his voice hoarse. "She is no longer an employee of Apex Air." As if on cue, 2 more Port Authority officers arrived. They moved to flank a now catatonic Susan. One of them spoke to her softly. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Susan didn't resist. She seemed to have shrunk, all the bitterness and rage that had defined her now gone, leaving behind only a hollow, pathetic shell. As they led her away, she finally looked back, her tear-filled eyes finding Maya one last time. It was a look of utter, desolate ruin. Then she was gone, swallowed by the concourse, a ghost erased from the world she had once ruled. James put a protective arm around Maya's shoulders, shielding her from the lingering stares. He looked at the captain and first officer of Flight 712, who had come out onto the jet bridge to witness the resolution. "Captain," he said, his tone shifting to one of professional respect, "I am lifting the ground stop on your aircraft. My sincerest apologies to you, your crew, and your passengers for the delay caused by this unfortunate incident." Captain Eva Rostova, a woman who had seen almost everything in her 30 years of flying, simply nodded, her expression one of profound awe. "No apology necessary, Director," she said, her voice firm. "Thank you for holding our own accountable." The reckoning was complete. The story of what happened at Gate B-24 spread through JFK and then the wider aviation community with the speed of a viral video, which, thanks to a dozen passengers, it soon became. By the time Maya was settling into her spacious seat on the new flight, clips of a tearful gate agent being forced to retrieve a passport from the trash under the icy stare of an FAA official were trending on social media. The narrative was clear and damning. Karen Gate agent versus FAA dad. Within the hour, just as James had predicted, his phone rang. It was Robert Walsh, the CEO of Apex Air. His tone was not just apologetic, it was bordering on terrified. "James," Walsh began, dispensing with formalities. "I am calling to offer my most sincere, profound, and unreserved apology to you, and more importantly, to your daughter Maya. I have seen the video. I have read the preliminary report from my station manager. There are no words to describe how appalled I am. This is not who we are. The evidence suggests otherwise, Robert," James replied coolly. "What happened today was not a system failure. It was a human failure enabled by a system that either doesn't train its people properly or doesn't care what they do. This wasn't just rudeness. It was an act of prejudice that escalated to the commission of a federal crime." "You're right. You're absolutely right," Walsh conceded. "Susan Peterson has been terminated, of course. That's a given. Her file is being turned over to the authorities. But that's not enough. This can't just be about one employee. This has to be a catalyst for change. I am personally overseeing the development of a new, mandatory, top-to-bottom anti-bias and de-escalation training program for all customer-facing employees. And I'd like to name it in Maya's honor. The Baldwin Initiative, if you'd permit it. A permanent reminder." James considered it. It was a smart PR move, but it was also a tangible, structural change. "That is a start," he said. "I will be expecting a full report on my desk in 30 days detailing the curriculum and implementation schedule. The FAA investigation, however, will proceed. We need to be certain this is an isolated incident and not a cultural rot." Meanwhile, Maya's journey to Boston was profoundly different. The flight crew on her new flight treated her like royalty. The captain came back to personally apologize on behalf of the airline. The passenger next to her, a corporate lawyer who had already seen the story on his news feed, simply shook his head and said, "I'm glad your father did what he did. Accountability is a rare thing these days." When she landed, she called her dad. "I'm here," she said, her voice finally light and free of the earlier trauma. "I'm safe." "I never doubted you would be," James said, the warmth fully returned to his voice. "I'm sorry your day started that way, superstar." "It's okay, Dad," she said, and she realized it truly was. "You know, for a minute there, I felt so small and powerless. And then I remembered who my dad was." "It wasn't about who I am, Maya," he corrected her gently. "It was about what she did being wrong. My title just gave me a faster way to prove it. Never forget that you had the right on your side from the very beginning. The power was in the truth." The consequences for Susan Peterson were swift and severe. Beyond losing her job and being blacklisted from the airline industry, she was charged by federal prosecutors with destruction of a government document. The overwhelming video evidence made for a short trial. She was sentenced to community service and a lengthy probation, a public and permanent mark of her disgrace. For Apex Air, the incident was a costly wake-up call. They settled with the Baldwin family for an undisclosed sum, which James and Maya immediately donated to a charity that sponsored underprivileged students pursuing careers in science and technology. The Baldwin Initiative was rolled out across the company, becoming a model for other airlines. Daniel Fletcher, the station manager, was demoted and moved to a non-managerial role. Ben, the junior agent who had tried to intervene, gave a detailed statement to the investigators and was soon promoted to Fletcher's old position, a small but significant sign that the culture was indeed changing. 1 year later, Maya was thriving. Her summer at MIT had been everything she had hoped for and more, leading to an early admission offer. She was now a freshman, already excelling in her classes. She rarely thought about Susan Peterson, but she often thought about the lesson of that day at Gate B-24. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the fact that an injustice, no matter how small or personal it may seem, can be a crack in the foundation of a much larger system. And sometimes, it takes a person with the right tools and the will to use them to seal that crack and make the foundation stronger for everyone. The ripples from the seismic event at Gate B-24 did not dissipate quickly. In the immediate aftermath, Maya Baldwin became an unwilling celebrity. The videos, stripped of context and remixed for maximum outrage, made her face recognizable to millions. For the first few weeks of her prestigious MIT program, a place where she had longed to be known for her mind, she was instead the girl from the airport. Whispers followed her in the hallowed halls. Fellow students would stare a moment too long in the dining hall. The experience was deeply isolating, a second, more insidious wave of humiliation that threatened to overshadow the excitement of her new life. She found her sanctuary where she always had, in the elegant certainty of physics and the complex beauty of engineering. While the internet debated her story, Maya was deriving thrust-to-weight ratios and calculating orbital mechanics. She poured the anxiety and frustration of her unwanted fame into her work, her focus becoming a shield. Her late-night calls with her father were her lifeline. He didn't offer easy platitudes. He offered perspective. "They're not talking about you, Maya," he told her one evening as she confessed her frustration. "They're talking about a symbol, an idea. They've turned you into a character in a story about injustice. That has nothing to do with the brilliant young woman who is acing her thermodynamics class. Your job is not to live up to their story. Your job is to write your own. Let them have the symbol. You keep the substance." His words became her mantra. She politely declined interview requests from morning news shows and online magazines, instead joining the university's rocketry club and volunteering for a project designing a new type of landing gear. She let her actions redefine her, slowly but surely replacing the viral image with the reality of who she was, a dedicated, formidable student of the skies. Meanwhile, the system churned on. The legal proceedings against Susan Peterson were swift. Her defense attorney's attempt to paint her as a chronically stressed, underpaid employee buckling under pressure was utterly dismantled by the crystal-clear video footage. It wasn't a moment of stress. It was an act of targeted malice. The jury's deliberation was short. Convicted of misuse of a federal document, Susan was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and a hefty fine. But her true sentence was the one delivered at the gate. She was a pariah in the industry she had called home, her name now a cautionary tale whispered in airline break rooms across the country. For Apex Air, the reckoning was a corporate crucible. The stock dipped, and thousands of loyal customers, disgusted by the incident, publicly cut up their credit cards and switched allegiances. The financial bleeding was immediate and severe. Robert Walsh, the CEO, understood that a simple apology was not enough. The Baldwin Initiative became a multi-million-dollar flagship program. They hired a top-tier DEI consulting firm to gut their training manuals. The new program was an intensive, week-long course for all 20,000 of their customer-facing employees. It involved implicit bias training, conflict de-escalation role-playing with professional actors, and detailed modules on the legal and ethical responsibilities of their position. It was expensive and logistically nightmarish, but the alternative, being permanently branded as the airline that trashed a child's future, was far worse. The FAA investigation, led by a team appointed by James Baldwin but operating with full independence, concluded 6 months later. It found significant cultural deficiencies and inadequate training protocols at Apex Air's JFK hub. The resulting fines were the largest levied against a domestic carrier in over a decade. But the report also cited the airline's extraordinary and proactive remedial actions post-incident, specifically praising the Baldwin Initiative as a new gold standard for the industry. The message was clear. The failure was severe, but the course correction was genuine. The incident at Gate B-24 became a seminal case study, discussed at aviation security conferences and boardroom meetings, forcing a long-overdue conversation about the human element in air travel. A year passed. The world moved on, as it always does. The viral videos were buried under new layers of digital outrage. Maya was no longer just a symbol. She was a rising star in MIT's aerospace department, co-author of a paper on composite materials, and the newly elected treasurer of the rocketry club. The fire of that day had not consumed her. It had forged her. For her trip home to New York for the summer break, she deliberately booked a ticket on Apex Air. Her mother had been hesitant, but Maya insisted. "I have to," she had explained. "It's about finishing the flight." Walking through the familiar expanse of JFK's Terminal 4 was a surreal experience. It was the same space, yet everything felt different. She felt different. She was no longer a nervous teenager on the cusp of her future. She was a confident young woman living it. Her stride was sure, her gaze direct. As she checked the departure board, a small, ironic smile touched her lips. Apex Air 712, Boston, Gate B24. On time of all the gates, it had to be that one. It felt less like a coincidence and more like the universe demanding a final, definitive confrontation with the memory. She walked down the long concourse, her carry-on gliding silently behind her. She reached the gate and saw the podium, the trash bin beside it, the whole familiar tableau. But the energy was completely different. It was calm, professional, and efficient. The gate agents were a diverse team of 3, 2 men and a woman, all sharp in their redesigned uniforms. When the call for first-class boarding was made, Maya joined the line, her heart beating just a little faster than normal. When it was her turn, she stepped forward and handed her phone with the digital boarding pass and her new, pristine passport to a young black woman whose name tag read, Danielle. The agent scanned the pass, her movements crisp and professional. She looked at the passport, then up at Maya, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. For a heart-stopping second, Maya braced herself. But there was no suspicion in Danielle's eyes, only a quiet, profound respect. "Miss Baldwin," the agent said, her voice warm and sincere, "it is a genuine honor to have you fly with us today. Welcome aboard." She handed the passport back to Maya, not as a gatekeeper granting passage, but as a professional offering service. The simple, dignified gesture was the final puzzle piece clicking into place. It was the proof that change wasn't just a corporate memo. It had reached the front lines. It was real. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice thick with an emotion she hadn't expected. "Thank you very much." She walked down the jet bridge, the sterile tunnel feeling like a pathway to victory. She found her seat, 1A, the same one as a year ago. As she settled in, she looked out the window at the controlled chaos of the tarmac, the ballet of ground crews and baggage carts. A year ago, she had looked out this same window with naive excitement. Now she looked out with the wisdom of someone who understood the complex machinery of the world, both mechanical and human. She understood that her father's power wasn't just his title, it was in his unwavering commitment to principle. She understood that accountability wasn't about revenge, it was about repair, about making things right so the next person wouldn't be broken. The ugliness she had experienced had not defined her. It had revealed her. It had revealed a strength she never knew she possessed. The aircraft door sealed with a soft hiss, and the plane began its slow pushback from the gate. Maya pulled out her phone and sent a short text to her dad. "Boarding. Everything is perfect." The reply came back almost instantly, a message of love and validation that spanned the distance between them. It always should have been. "Have a great flight, superstar. Love you." Maya switched her phone to airplane mode and leaned her head back against the seat. As the Boeing 737 taxied toward the runway, she didn't feel the anger or the humiliation of the past. She felt only a profound sense of peace. The journey was complete. The horizon was waiting, and she was flying toward it strong and unbroken. This story is a stark reminder that prejudice and abuse of power can surface in the most unexpected places, even at an airport gate. But more importantly, it shows that accountability is not just a concept, it's an action. Maya's ordeal was a fire, but her father's response was the extinguisher, swift, decisive, and absolute. It highlights the profound truth that the best way to fight injustice is with unwavering resolve and by using the tools at your disposal to enforce the rules that are meant to protect us all. The world isn't always fair, but as we saw today, sometimes karma doesn't just knock on the door, it grounds the entire plane to make its point. If you were moved by this story and believe that accountability should always prevail, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where justice is served, one grounded flight at a time. Click the notification bell so you never miss a moment.